a single, almost unbelievable number. Over 22,000 sailors and soldiers set sail from Lisbon in 1588. Barely half would make it back to Spain. This wasn't a military defeat. It was a human tragedy on a scale almost too vast to comprehend. But here's the most haunting fact. The English barely fired a shot. Most of them died from a different kind of enemy altogether. So what went wrong? Why did the greatest naval force of its time simply vanish? The history we know says it was an impossible stroke of luck. The Protestant wind, they called it. But what if that luck had run out? What if the wind hadn't turned? We asked an AI to look into that alternate timeline, and it showed us a world you wouldn't recognize. But this isn't just about a battle. It's about the silent killers and fatal miscalculations that haunted the Armada long before the first cannonball was fired. Wait until you see what happens next. To truly grasp the stakes, you have to understand the world of 1588. It wasn't just a battle of ships, it was a crusade. On one side, King Philip II, the most powerful man on earth, saw himself as the chosen sword of the Catholic Church. On the other, Queen Elizabeth II, a Protestant heretic in his eyes, had become a pirate queen, unleashing men like Sir Francis Drake. Drake called his 1587 raid on the port of Cadiz singeing the King of Spain's beard. But what it really did was burn away a year of Philip's time, and most critically, thousands of the fresh oak barrels needed to carry water and food for his men. These were not just provisions, they were the very lifeblood of the expedition. But the true scale of the plan's ambition and its fatal flaw lay in the command. King Philip II entrusted the Armada not to a seasoned admiral, but to the Duke of Medina Sidonia, a man with no prior naval experience. His orders were simple and absolute: sail to the Netherlands and rendezvous with the Duke of Parma's army. He was given no room for deviation, no authority to change the plan, no matter what. Some of his subordinates, men who had spent their lives at sea, urged him to attack the English fleet in their home port of Plymouth to gain a decisive advantage. But Medina Sidonia refused. He was a man bound by his master's will, a tragic figure leading a great fleet on a fool's errand he knew in his heart was doomed. What most accounts of this clash miss is that the true battle was fought not with cannonballs, but with invisible foes. By the time the two fleets met, they were both floating plague grounds. The English commander, Lord Howard of Effingham, wrote in a letter that he feared sickness more than any hurt that the Spaniards will do. Thousands of sailors on both sides were already succumbing to diseases like dysentery and typhus, rampant in the cramped, unsanitary conditions. In a grim twist of fate, the English fleet lost more than 20% of its men to sickness before the first cannon was even fired. This was a war fought against nature, a brutal, unseen enemy that spared no one. In our world, the Armada was a story of cascading failures. The English fleet, though smaller and with fewer guns, had a profound advantage. Their ships were low and sleek, built for speed and long-range gunnery. The Spanish ships, by contrast, were floating fortresses designed to close the distance and fight man to man. It was a clash of doctrines. The Spanish were an army at sea, the English a navy. But here's what historians got wrong about the most crucial moment. In our timeline, the Armada anchored at Calais, waiting for the Duke of Parma's army. The Duke of Parma, however, was hopelessly blockaded by a flotilla of small Dutch flyboats. With no way to communicate quickly, the two forces were isolated. But in our new timeline, let's change just one thing: the wind. The southerly winds blow true for a week. The English still launch their 8 fireships, but their approach is slow, predictable. Spanish patrol boats spot them early. The formation holds. Crucially, a fast frigate, its sails full with the southerly wind, reaches the Duke of Parma. He receives the message: the channel is clear. Begin embarkation. Within 48 hours, England's worst nightmare becomes a reality. The English Navy tries to attack, but they are outmaneuvered. The Armada's massive galleons form an impenetrable wall of cannon and steel. But here's a detail that most people don't know. As the battered English fleet retreats, Elizabeth I's advisors urge her to flee London. The city is in a state of panic. But wait, this is where the AI got it wrong. In our world, the Queen didn't flee. She rode out to her troops at Tilbury, wearing steel over her gown, and delivered one of the most defiant speeches in history. This final detail will change everything. In this new timeline, she never gets that chance. The Spanish march on London is terrifyingly fast. The Tower of London is seized, becoming the new Spanish military headquarters. Elizabeth Fund, with her forces shattered, is captured in a last, desperate stand. What the AI showed next was a world remade in Spain's image. First, the spiritual transformation. Catholicism is restored by force. An English Inquisition hunts down and purges heresy. Owning an English Bible becomes a crime, punishable by death. The merry England of legend is replaced by a dark, occupied province simmering with resentment. With England under Spanish rule, a cascade of dominoes falls across the globe. The Dutch revolt, without English support, is brutally crushed. The independent Dutch Republic, a future hub of finance and philosophy, is strangled in its cradle. The great religious wars of Europe play out very differently, with the Protestant cause severely weakened. But the biggest change is across the Atlantic. In our world, the defeat of the Armada broke Spain's naval dominance and allowed England to begin its colonial ambitions. In this alternate history, that never happens. No Jamestown in 1607, no Pilgrims in 1620, no British colonization of North America at all. The unique English model of self-government never takes root. The United States of America is never born. The AI paints a sober picture. It's a powerful reminder that history isn't some grand, inevitable story. It's a fragile chain of events. A world where the Spanish Armada won is a world dominated by a single empire, where the ideas of democracy and individual liberty as we know them were crushed before they ever had a chance to grow. But the truth is even more complex. As the battered Spanish fleet tried to escape by sailing around Scotland and Ireland, they met the real enemy: disease and starvation. The rancid water and spoiled food from those defective casks became a plague. Dysentery and typhus swept through the ships, killing thousands more than English cannonballs ever could. The English fleet themselves lost more than 20% of their men to sickness before the battle ever began. This was a war fought against nature and logistics. For centuries, these ghost ships were lost to the sea, but their stories were waiting. Off the coasts of Scotland and Ireland, archaeologists have brought them back to light, and with them, the true human cost of this grand failure. This evidence has never been shown before. The Girona, a galleass from the Armada, was wrecked off the coast of Ireland. Divers recovered a treasure trove of artifacts that give us a haunting glimpse into the lives of the men on board. The most powerful find was a delicate golden salamander, a lucky charm against fire set with rubies, a small personal token of hope that failed to save its owner. This final detail will change everything. The defeat of the Spanish Armada was not just a military victory, it was a test of human endurance, a battle against disease, and a reminder that history is built on 1,000 small, flawed moments. What seemingly small detail is right now, this very second, setting the course for the next 400 years of our lives? If you want to dive deeper into the story of the Armada, you can visit the Royal Museum's Greenwich to see the iconic Armada portrait of Elizabeth Rainman, or travel to Belfast to see artifacts from the Girona at the Ulster Museum. You can also see cannons from the wreck of the La Trinidad Valenciera at the Tower Museum in Derry or the National Museum of Ireland. For further reading, check out the definitive work The Armada by Garrett Mattingly or The Confident Hope of a Miracle by Neil Hansen. If you enjoyed this journey through history, make sure you don't miss our next video. Be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell.